right, looks like we're live. So before we jump right into this video today, if you guys haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. It makes a huge difference in helping me reach entrepreneurs just like yourself who are wanting to grow their businesses. As far as the video today goes, this is a no BS advice to get rich in the next 10 years from Alex Hormozi on his main channel. Super excited to actually do a reaction to this. Haven't done a reaction for a couple of weeks. We had a couple of things go on where we were traveling and we're getting ready to move. So haven't really been able to post on the channel like I have wanted to, but super excited. We're like 3 years, I'm like 3 years into my journey of, getting rich. So it'd be interesting to see what his like advice for 10 years is and how that really looks in comparison. By the way, if you're wanting to scale your business with me and my wife Kinda at Laney Media, there is a link down below in the description if you want to connect with us as well. So here we go. What you want to do when you look at your Nope, that was not him.
$100 million in net worth at age 31. But before that, I lost all my money twice. And the difference between me losing all my money the first few times and now are these rules. So this is no BS advice for making money and keeping it. Number one, passive income is a lie. If you think about how money is made, you make money during time because every minute we're alive, a minute passes, time passes, and we make money over that time period, which means every single person on planet Earth has a dollars per hour that they make. And so it's not that passive income doesn't exist just as much as active income doesn't exist. It's a spectrum where it's how active is it or how passive is the activity that I'm doing relative to the time that I'm investing. And so I would eliminate active versus passive and simply say, what is my return on time or how much do I make per hour? It's just that most people get really scared of that because like no one should trade their hours for money. Everyone trades their hours for money. It's just that when they receive the money, it's just not denoted in hours. And so I think there's two downstream impacts in terms of changing your behavior around this that I had to apply. Number one is that I was obsessed with trying to find quick, easy.
So I'm going to make a point here. But one of the things I just wanted to say super quick, and I'm going to talk about this. I just got to get my iPad set up because I want to do an explanation with an actual freaking diagram. And I didn't have this plugin ready to go because I didn't think I would need it. And of course, as soon as I do that, I need it. So bear with me here. But the interesting thing is he's saying you make money over time. I've talked about this channel multiple times, or on this channel multiple times, about the rule of 72. Let's get this pulled up here. I think everything should be mostly good to go. Look at that, except I'm going to do another screen. I'm going to do a blank. I'm going to do vertical, and I'm going to rotate it. There we go. We have a better size. So Robert Kiyosaki talks about like the cash flow quadrant, okay? Where you're an employee, contractor, business owner, investor. Rule of 72. So if you take, let's say you invest in the S&P 500, your rate of return is 10%. You're going to take 72, divide that by 10, and that is how long it is going to take you. 7.2 years for your money to double. So if you invested like I was saying here, S&P 500, you're going to invest $100 in that and it's going to average 10%. It is going to take you 7.2 years to double that money. And if you read Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, the number one thing that he says to do every single stinking time you read that book, which is like the most frustrating thing to me on planet Earth, is he's like, you're probably right here. You should go immediately to right here. Or like that's like the goal, right? But he pretty much spends all of his time talking about this. He really doesn't talk about like becoming like your own contractor or being your own boss. He really doesn't talk about like building businesses. His whole thing is literally just become an investor, buy rental properties, be rich, buy my gold that I sell, right? That's my biggest issue with Robert Kiyosaki. And I just wish he would talk and give more guidance, at least in his books, in a perfect world, about how to do these two. Because realistically, like okay, you're an employee, like what 1099 jobs can you do? Like, are you gonna go on like Upwork, Fiverr, DoorDash? And obviously these things change over time. It's either a book, but like the guy has a lot of employees, right? He should have someone, and he sells a lot of copies of his book, so he should have someone or be able to write a book where you can go ahead and update the editions consistently over time and have it not be a big deal. But the number one thing, so he's talking like net worth goes up like over time, right? So as we see here, like if you're taking 7.2 years to compound, right, and this is going to be a pretty crazy graph. Each little dash is like, we're going to say 7 years. So you're like, oh, why did I do it like that? Mercy. 7 years, 14 years, 21 years, 28 years. And, you start off with $100, here in the beginning. Should have Excel up. I can do this a lot faster in Excel probably. Anyways, and takes you 7 years to go from 100, or 7 years. You start out. Why did I put that dot down there? You start at 100, then 7 years you're at 200, then at 14 years that doubles to 400, then at 21 years you're going to be up at like 800, right? Because you're doubling pretty fast. You're on an exponential curve, right? So if you'd started at like $50, right, at 7 years, you're at 100, and then you're at 200, and then you're at 400, right? Still following that same trajectory. But the crazy thing is like every year, so like let's say 7 years in, you add like another $50, right? And there's like a lot of different ways you can play with this. But then that $50 also starts to compound. So like 14 years is going to be $100. 21 years, that's going to be more money, right? So like obviously in an ideal world, you're able to invest more money like right now, in the now of it, which like hopefully, and what if I were him, what I would talk about is just going into figuring out how to optimize to make potentially, except he's not going to talk about this, because if you can pull money out of a box, like you're going to make a lot more money, right? And if you're able to invest more money now, going back to our little whole investor thing, that's amazing. But when it comes to like business, like this little graph, you might compound at 10%, but they're unrealized gains on our little chart. And realistically, you're gonna make, with our little ticks over here, year 1 through like year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Well, I actually did 10. I think that's 5. I can erase that. But like you're gonna make like $0, $0, $0. You might pay yourself like the first year like $50K, like 3 or 4 years into it, and then it's gonna be like $50K, 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 and then you get to this event where you can either sell the business or your business becomes like really profitable and you're actually able to stop investing in the business. And like the value of the business ticks up over time, right? And then at year 10, it can become like really valuable because like as businesses get bigger, they become easier to manage and therefore more of an asset and less of a thing that you own that pays you a lot of money. It becomes something that people can, buy and trade, right? And as businesses become bigger, they become worth more money because it's like a flywheel. It can self-sustain, right? And your income, year 10, you might decide to sell and you might get a huge chunk of cash, right? Or be able to take profits out where you still like, you get a lot more money than you did, for the last 10 years. And it depends on the type of business. Some businesses aren't like, and this would be an example of a mostly like capital intensive business where it just takes tons of capital where you just have to reinvest year over year in order to actually like get any money out of it. But let's see what he has to say. I know this was a long tangent, so.
Low, effort money things. And so I ended up spending tons of money on things that I was obsessed with, hoping would cost me no time to make. And I would put not nearly enough time to the things I was actively making money with and thinking, how could I just make my active income significantly higher? And I would get obsessed with the idea that everything I did actively had to be scalable or it wasn't worth it. Because if it's not scalable, then why should I bother? I shouldn't trade my time for money. But if I looked at what I was making over the last year and divided it by the amount of money I made per hour, this activity was 15 times what I was averaging per hour. So I should absolutely do as many hours of that until all of my hours are that. And then I should find something else I can trade my time for that's even higher. And so if you want a very humbling experience, look at how much you made last year and then divide it by 2,000.
You can read all about that in this book right here, Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell, if you want a further understanding of how to actually make money off of your business. If not, what he is saying is excellent. That's like the main core strategy here.
If you want to know how much you made just in a 40-hour work week. Now, if you want to look at how much you made per actual hour of being alive, you can divide it by around 8,000. Or just take that number and divide it by 4. And that's actually how much you make per hour. And so when you're looking at, is this worth my time? If it's more than that number, it probably is. And so what I should have done and what changed for me was that I stopped trying to invest my money from my active into trying to find more passive things and try to say, how do I invest my money more into my active to multiply my active that I know is working? Number 2, if you can't buy it twice, don't buy it once. Or even buy it 3 times or 4 times or 5 times over, don't buy it once. And the way that really shifted how I started spending money, or rather started saving money and not spending money, was when I started looking at how much time it took me to make the amount of money post-tax to buy whatever I wanted. And I remember this clear as day. I was working at Smoothie King as a blender tender, and I was making $6.75 an hour, and I just gotten a raise from $6.25 an hour. I'm dating myself. Anyways, and while I was there, the coworkers that I had, and I would always go to lunch next door at Cosi, which was like a sandwich shop, and it was like $13 for a sandwich, right? And a drink and chips and whatever, right? And so I remember looking at my check, and my $6.75 an hour after taxes and fees was like $6 an hour, and I was like, man, I gave up 2 hours of my 6-hour shift every shift to go buy lunch. And I was like, I'm literally giving a third of my earning away for lunch every single day. If I knew that I had to work the first 2 hours just to get the sandwich, I don't think I'd ever make that trade. And yet I was making it every day. And then I started thinking, I'd go to the mall and be like, oh, do you want a new shirt? And it was at the Gap and it was $30. And I was like, okay, well shoot, that's a whole shift. And I was like, would I work a whole shift?
Funny enough, I was like doing this in high school and my friends would like look at me super weird. And I think because my first job in high school, I worked as a draftsman for a composite manufacturing company. And the crazy thing is I made pretty good money. I made 12 and then I got raised to 14 an hour back in like 2015. That was like pretty decent money for being in high school, especially like a lot of my friends would go make like $8 at a minimum wage job. So I felt pretty good about that. Plus, I was getting a lot of experience. I wanted to be an engineer, and I was doing something I really enjoyed. But then it was like, oh, you go to lunch and you spend $15 on lunch. That's like an hour and a half of time, right? Or I was into running, so like every time I go buy a pair of running shoes that were like $120, that would be 10 hours of my time pre-tax. Post-tax, it's like a day and a half. So just like massively time expensive things, and it's a really good way to look at anything when it comes to cost. Now that is what I consider more, and it's not what I even do now, because, for example, you have your the dollars per hour that you make, right? And that you use that to figure out like how much time it really takes you to pay for a certain item. Now there is a difference. And this is like a very much like a now, like, and I'm trying to think of like the best way. This is like a now mindset, like today and the current. What's actually really different is when you look at that money you could take and you compare it to what your rate of return is if you invested it. And this is more of a future mindset, right? Looking towards the future, right? Now, obviously, like you have to like live a little bit in between both of these, because if you invest every dime you make, you'll starve to death. And if you only pay for food, eventually you're going to be old and your body is literally going to be worthless, and you won't be able to do anything with that money. You'll just have a giant pile of cash, and that's it, right? So comparing these two, really good. Keep in mind you have to live in the moment. But like if you're going to spend a ton of money, like if I'm going to go buy a new mountain bikes are like stupid expensive. You can get them for as little as like $1,000 new, all the way up to like, $10K plus. Like if you really want to go all out, heck, you could spend 20, 30K on a bike if you really wanted to. Now, does that matter? Because, you get into this whole like skill level versus use thing. No, but like you could easily spend 10K on that bike. But like if I spent 10K, or realistically, like Specialized has some really cool new bikes that are like in the 5K range. But if I put like 5K into like buying a bike, like a cool new e-bike, for example, so I can do twice the long rides, that money over time, like again, 10% compounded in the S&P 500, like 7 years from now, that's going to be 10K, then it's going to be 20K, and then it's going to be 40K, right? And I'm 26. So by the time I retire, in 4 years, that can be upwards of like 80K, 80 to 160K, somewhere in that range, right? Just because of how many times it is going to be able to compound or its earning potential, right? If you think about like dropping a ball, you have a ball on a counter and the ball goes off, it has a lot of potential the higher the cliff is. The younger you are, the more potential your money has. As you get older, this cliff progressively gets smaller and smaller because you have less time for your money that you invest to actually compound, right? But I just like to think of this as the same way, like kind of like in physics, where like as the ball gets higher and higher off the ground, the more potential energy it has. Sitting there, it doesn't have any energy. It obviously still has to go off and has to accelerate all the way down to, gain that energy. Versus, and it's like the same with your money. You have to actually take this 5K and invest it for it to actually grow in value, right? And a lot of times people will take that money, put it in a bank account, whatever, and it won't get used. So keep that in mind.
If someone just held up a shirt that I didn't need to do it. And I was like, I don't think I would.
Gotta love these ads.
And so all of a sudden it started shifting how my buying happened because I started feeling the pain associated with what it would take if I had to do that before getting the thing I was going to buy. And it completely changed my buying behavior. And to be very clear, saving money won't make you money, but saving money allows you to have money, and having money allows you to look further out. And when you look further out, you can take on bigger risks, which absolutely will make you more money. And when you're looking at the price of whatever the thing you're trying to buy is, obviously when I was a teenager looking at a shirt, I was looking at, okay, I'm making $6 an hour, a shirt's $30. But when you're an adult and you're making $100 an hour and you're looking at a $500 or $1,000 purchase, would you work 2 days in order to do that? I don't know. Would I? Probably not. And sometimes you think, hey, would I work all day for 2 days to go out with the boys for 3 hours on Saturday? I'd probably be like, guys, I'm not going to work for 2 days just to go have 3 hours of fun, right? That feel like I'd rather just not work the 2 days. And that was the thing is whenever I had I'd rather just not work than do that thing, then I was like, I shouldn't buy that thing. For example, when I was poor, I only spent cash. And so my easiest way of actually creating a budget was that I had a personal training client who paid me $2,000 a month in cash. And so 100% of my money that came in through the business and credit cards and everything else is just what went into my bank account. And the only thing I knew I could live on was inside of my wallet. And so as that got replenished, and the thing is that I'm so scared with money, or I was so frugal with money, that I would always make sure that I had more than that to make it for the next payment, because sometimes the guy would take a day or two. You pay on Wednesday rather than a Monday or whatever, and I need to make sure that I have food for Chipotle. 3, most people overestimate what they can accomplish in a year, and they underestimate what they can accomplish in a decade. And every new employee that I have that walks into acquisition.com, the number one thing that they say they want is growth. And I have this talk with them, which is the 10-year $1 million contract. But it's less about the $1 million and more about take whatever your net worth is now and add a 0 to it, or add 2 zeros to it. You can accomplish that in a decade. If you look at the biggest companies in the entire world who were worth multiple billions from their inception until the time they were worth multiple billions, many times it's under 10 years, but it's still more than 5, more than 7. And so you can accomplish life-changing, crazy amounts of wealth in a decade. And so if you could write a contract to yourself and say, I will make no money for 10 years, but on the 10th year, I will add a 0 or 2 zeros or 3 zeros to my net worth, would you do it? And if the answer is yes, which it almost invariably is with every person who comes into my business, then I say, great, now act like it. And so if you knew that you would make this amount of money over that period of time, you would stop this obsession, myself included. This is me giving my advice to myself who lost it twice. When I was able to shift to, okay, what would I have to do that would make it unreasonable that I don't 10x in 10 years? Then all of a sudden I started making very reasonable bets that I knew would compound unto itself over that period of time. And then winning became inevitable rather than a game of chance. And so oftentimes you have potential earning and then actualized earning. And usually as you're realizing the potential earning you have, you're usually losing out on your investing into that potential, right? You're realizing the potential. And that's kind of like the kid that learns one skill and then immediately says, I'm gonna start a business opportunity around this one skill that makes me $5,000 a month. Or they have this one skill and say, hey, this company is willing to pay me $100,000 a year to go do this skill, where I have this other company that'll give me a free internship where I could 10x my potential earning in 3 years, but I'm gonna make $35,000 a year for the 3 years. Which one would you take? The problem is most people will take the $100,000 now and forego the investment in self. And that's the thing is we are the asset that we invest in, and the currency we invest into ourselves in is time, experience, and skills, right? Skill is the outcome. The time and the effort is what we put into it to gain the experiences, which ultimately give us the skills. But if you're in an environment where you're not compounding your potential earning, then you're actually losing out long-term. You're ripping up your $1 million or your 10x or 100x contract for a decade from now so you can get the short, fast money today. And that's why in the early days when you have limited amounts of money but lots of time and energy, instead of putting your money in the S&P 500, I like to say put it in the SME 500, because the asset that is you will always beat the stock market. Number 4, you should only have to get rich once. In other words, don't bet what you have and need for something you don't have and don't need. And some of the gravest mistakes I made manifested in, for example, me getting into a partnership that I shouldn't have gotten into because I wanted even more faster. Now, when you get into a partnership, which is usually the time where you put the most risk on the table, one is you guarantee the largest decrease in your earning power. You pay with the most expensive thing you have, which is equity, to somebody else. And so people get obsessive about what they're 5%, 10% later when we're making money. But day one, they're like, all right, we cut the pie in half. Oh, we cut the pie into thirds. Right up front before anything's really happened. If you work with a partner or decide to partner up with somebody, one of your friends, one of your coworkers, this is coming from somebody who has 9 failed partnerships before I met Layla, and then that has now worked, and now I have successful partnerships. A partner needs to have one of these 3 things that you do not have. They either have to have money that you don't have, and then the clear contribution is that money. They need to have experience you don't have, and the clear contribution is that experience. Or number 3, they have time and energy that you don't have, and the clear contribution is that time and energy. And so I added that second part on, is that just because someone has experience, if they're not contributing it to the partnership clearly, then you're still not going to get the benefit from it. If they have the time and the energy, but it's not clearly defined how they're going to invest that time and energy into the things you both get a return, then it's not going to be a good partnership. And I've lost so much money in partnerships, especially early on. One of my 2 big losses was from a partner. And a big part of it was I was insecure, and I thought I just had to have somebody else because I was afraid to do it on my own. Real quick, if you're trying to make your first dollar online, you can go to school.com/games. We've got a whole system that's set up. It's a platform. You can start it for free. I've got instructional videos. I take a call every single week. As a owner, and you're trying to scale, and you're doing $1 million a year, and you want to go bigger, go to acquisition.com, hit scale, and you're never going to learn to manage your money. And so the thing is that all of us obviously have equal amounts of time that we're given, not necessarily in life, but at least every day. And so the people who get the best returns on their money are the ones who learn how to best invest their time. And so a big misconception around money is that money, in my opinion, is an encapsulated version of time. And since all of us trade time for the money that we get, then it means for each person, money represents a certain amount of time. And the wealthier you get, it's just that the denomination of money represents less time for you. And so for someone else, $100 may represent 4 hours. For a wealthier person, $100 may represent 4 minutes. And so it's a constant appraisal that you do on a regular basis, looking on your calendar and saying, what things do I have here that I could trade my time for more money? And so again, this video is about making money overall. I'm not saying that you...
Hot take. I mean, honestly, I view money as like a resource. And what does that resource allow you to do? Well, a number of different things. You can trade this resource. Money can get you back time. But the funny thing is, usually to get that resource, you have to put like a lot of time back in to get that money, right? One thing people don't understand. However, like when you combine that with compounding interest, investing, whatever, like you can get a lot more time down the road. And it depends if that's worth it to you. Like, you're only going to be in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s. You're only going to do all of that once. So making sure that you are investing your time how you want it to be is very important. But like another thing, like it really depends, because what that resource of money is it could potentially be things like vacations, right? It could potentially be different businesses you want to start that do different things that help society. It could potentially be charities, right? You might want to give to your church or your community. Trying to think what else. But there's like a lot of different things where that resource of money, it can get you a lot of different things. It might, heck, it might get you a plane so you can travel faster, right? Because if you have like limited time, like guess what? And you want to like travel to go ski over the weekend, or you want to go visit your family, or whatever it may be, there's different things that you can do that can make that a lot more feasible for you to do. And if you're rich enough, I forgot what the guy's name was. I'm gonna have to look him up. He basically built Florida from the ground up. But he was rich enough to the point where he was like, yeah, that swamp, I want to live there. I want to make it a state. And he like put the first railroad in Florida. He literally built the state like from the ground up. And it's just because like he played on a different level. And it's really cliche to say, but like he took that money, which was resource, and down here at the bottom of he had new state. And he said, yep, that is the one for me. That is what I want to do. Give me that new state. And so he did. That is what he did. And, you might not want a new state, but you might want a plane, or you might want to, like one of my things, I want to help rebuild manufacturing in America. I grew up working in manufacturing in Southwestern Oregon. and it's something that I fundamentally love. But those businesses, like, I would not be cut out for it right now at this point in my career. Most manufacturing businesses require a lot of capex or capital expenditures to get started, to get going. Very expensive to do, but it's something like I want to do and give back, because I think manufacturing is a very fundamental part of U.S. sovereignty and like maintaining our freedom into the future. And I also think really good manufacturing comes along with really good manufacturing jobs, which again helps go to the economy, helps people do something that they can love or enjoy doing, where they're technically challenged and they can receive fulfillment from their job. And for me, that's one of the things I really want. I also, in part, would love to be able to travel better, whether that involves a plane or investing in like high-speed rail companies that can utilize our existing track network or do upgrades to it to allow for trains that can go 125, 200 miles per hour on our existing railway in the U.S. Because believe it or not, we have more railway in the U.S. than in any other country in the world, which is pretty crazy. Super underutilized. Another thing would be like charity or like giving back to the community. Another thing that I really want to do, going back and playing back on how I want to, bring back a lot of manufacturing. One of the things I want to do eventually is be able to donate equipment to smaller schools where they can have a CNC, they can have a 3D printer, they can have a plasma cutter, they can have a router for their woodworking department, they can learn machining and all these technical skills in school, so they can leave high school and really community. It goes further, to education there, but they can like actually leave college and be able to get well-paying jobs without having to go take out $100,000 to $200,000 in student loans to make $50K a year.
You can't spend time with your girl, but there is a transaction cost for that time. And as long as you're willing to make the trade, then trade it all day. But the bad trades are the one that when you actually think about it in terms of what it costs, you'd say, I wouldn't do the trade. That's a bad deal. And so over time, if you continue to trade up how much time you invest for what it makes you, you will always make more in your income year after year after year. Number 6, check your bank account before you check social media first thing in the morning. And if it hurts you to check your bank account first thing, then you need to do it even more. Because for me, I started not knowing where my money was going. And so I had a friend who was like, dude, just look. And I honestly had anxiety looking at my bank account, looking at what money was going out and all that kind of stuff. And so I started making that habit and I had to confront it. But the crazy thing is as I started looking at my money, as I started paying attention to my money started paying attention to me and hanging around. And so Peter Drucker said, what gets measured gets managed. And so one of the most fascinating things that I found with human behavior in any kind of change is that the first thing that you can do to improve any metric for any skill is to actually measure it. And so if you want to lose weight, if you weigh yourself every day, no matter how painful the number is, that intervention alone helps people lose weight. You don't even have to talk about diet. You don't have to tell someone to exercise. If they look at the scale every day, they become aware of it. And when you become aware of a problem, you start consciously or subconsciously making moves to change it. You have that hesitation before you put that food in your mouth. You have that hesitation before you take your wallet out when you're looking at your bank account every day. It doesn't matter what it is, whatever you're trying to improve, but look at it, confront reality, and then reality will start to improve. And if you're curious, how long do you still check your bank account every day? And the honest truth is, I stopped checking when we had about 20 million bucks. And so that started when I had in the hundreds to $1,000 and continue to check every day. And when I stopped checking it was when I realized my daily fluctuations in market movements and things like that across my assets. I basically wasn't able to really see it on a daily basis. So I had to start extending my time horizon for when I would check it. So it'd be monthly or quarterly that I started checking it because that way at least I know I should have some movement upwards. And that is something that if you've done checking your bank account every single day for years, you start to already have developed some of those discipline skills, which then you can delay gratification of having saved money for a day to having saved money for a quarter. Number 7, learn how to make money before you start trying to learn how to make money. So I see so many guys, especially young guys, who are like, I've got $1,000. How do I invest the $1,000? They're trying to figure out a way to get that $1,000 to compound. They put it into a compounding calculator and they're like, man, if I get 50% returns for the next 40 years, I'm going to be a billionaire. But the thing is that one, it's most likely that you're going to buy a fucking Dogecoin and then it's going to tank and then you're just going to lose your $1,000 and be like, wow, think about this. I just worked for 2 weeks or 1 month to save that $1,000 and I lost it in seconds. So alternatively, if you take that $1,000 and you put it into how do I make more money? How do I actively improve the actions and skills that I have? That will get you far more. And that is where you invest the time rather than how do I make money? Because let's be real, you don't have much. So take the money you have into the skill.
All right, I'm going to do something. This is probably going to be worth way more money than this video. So if you got to this point in the video, congrats. I think you're actually going to learn something here. Basically, so like you have like, we'll call it minimum wage. In the US, this is like basically where everyone starts. You start here. This is level 1 of the video game, right? You're trading time for money. Okay? In order to not do that, you need to get to L2. And again, we're going to trade time for money for a little bit here, but you need to have your minimum wage job and you need to know how to save. Right? So you can get that $1,000. Once you get that $1,000, you can graduate to L3 of the video game, where you take that $1,000 and you get new skills where you're trading, you're still doing time for money, but we're going to, actually, I'm not even going to call it that. We're going to increase your skill level here. You're going to go learn how to do copywriting or automations or code or whatever. So you're going to increase your income, right? Or learn sales skills. Sales skills is like one of the most important, but like depending on what skill you choose. So like if you want to do coding, if you want to do sales, there's a lot of different things you can do. And I'd say if you're willing to wait up to 5 to 7 years, if you're doing high income skills, like your ceiling is going to be about $1 million a year. Whether you're working for someone and getting stock options, highly compensated, commission in sales, whatever it is, that's where you're going to go. And it's really hard. Like if you're going to get to that $1 million a year point, you might have to, be a contractor working for yourself in some like instances, just because, again, not all businesses will do this, but you can do this as an independent contractor. You can essentially do this sometimes working as a W-2 employee, depending on where you work. Obviously, you have to get yourself set up in the right circumstances where they don't have like ceiling caps on your commissions, stuff like that. And you're also selling a product where you can reach that type of commission level. A good example of this would be like selling solar door to door. It's a really big product. You get a fatter commission. You don't often have ceiling caps on what you can make. So it's a lot more possible. But that's like L3. L4 is like business owner. So where you own the process of doing this. And this is like the I'll call this 1 to 3 mil. This, the increased income, this is really like I'd call this like 50K a year all the way up to your 1 mil a year. Right? There's varying levels to like the increased income, like through learning. There's honestly like 2 or 3 levels within here and 2 or 3 job hops in order to get to the upper end of this. And most of those job hops are going to involve you hopping jobs to get the experience to then contract. Just to be brutally honest here, or they're going to be a sales position. At least all of the ways that I know of in order to do that. The next one, and especially like the non-Ivy ways, because the non-Ivy ways, they're going to involve Ivy education, landing a job at Goldman Sachs, and then like 10 years to become an MD, a managing director or whatever, in order to make that kind of money. Still doable, still plausible, but not achievable for a lot of people just because of how the world works. Like you could have the skills, but just because you didn't go to the Ivy means you're not getting the job, right? And then to get through like L5, like this is business owner, I'd call it like micro scale, right? Where you have between 1 and I'd say maybe max 10 people on your team between employees and contractors. L5, you're really going to break through that. And then L6, like this is like, this is like really like a small, medium, not even a medium, it's really just a small business. But depending on the business, you're going to be able to have more margin in here. You're going to not be doing everything yourself. And then L6, like you might be a small business, but, we'll call this like you're breaking into professionally managed territory. Where you can actually have like a legitimate like C-suite, for example. You can have a board of directors. You can have all of these different things that make your life as a business owner a lot easier than how you're going to currently exist, in either of these two categories. But this is kind of like the level to go from I can't make any money to I make a lot of money. And like there's a lot more to break down in here. Like going from minimum wage to like saving, and then like saving to like what do you invest in, and then like when do you make the jump to own your own business? Do you even want to do that? Because let me tell you what, like if you can get to like the 500 to 1 million a year, whether like you're in tech, sales, whatever, do you really want to go own your own business? Like it's a legitimate question. Like depends what your goals are, depends what you want. Not necessary for a lot of people. You can live an amazing life, have financial freedom, and really enjoy life without going through the headache of having increased income down here. Now, if you want to go like L7 or whatever, and these are just like levels, right? Theoretically, these levels, and once you get into I'd say the L4 range is, and the upper end of L3, but really L4, if you're able to take $1 million a year and invest, then you really get into the compounding, the investing. What does that actually look like? What assets under management do you have? It's a lot more complex. But once you get to L4, L5, L6, and really L6, once you hit 8 figures, if you're able to take $2-3 million home a year, that makes a huge difference on what your net worth is going to look like. And 10 mil is honestly the point where most businesses, you'll safely be able to pay yourself out $1 million a year in dividends with a 10% profit margin, which makes tax or take home pay $800K on that mil, but taxes are taxes, right? And there's there's things you can do to get around a lot of that. But if you get to that the L6 area, it makes it a lot easier to actually see your money compound very quickly because of how much you're investing. Versus if you're waiting for that first $1,000 you save to compound, it doesn't make sense. Because you can go take that $1,000 and go from making $8.25 an hour to making, 20 to 50 an hour, to making 50 to 100 an hour, to making 100 to 300 an hour. And it makes a huge difference.
Feel the flow of making more money rather than trying to take this tiny thing and going from a 10% return to a 20% return. Because the $100 extra that you yield on that $1,000, I promise you, if you learn how to add 50% to your skill set, it'll take whatever your annual earning is up by 50%. And that's gonna be a hell of a lot more than 10. And that's assuming everything goes up this year, which 1 out of 4 years it doesn't. When you say you don't have time, just immediately think to yourself, I'm lying, this is bullshit. Because every single person has between 5 to 9 a.m. and 5 to 9 p.m. every day of the week, even if you have a 40-hour job, even if you're a full-time student, because everybody has those 8 hours per day. Now, the thing is that we're not willing to make the trade-offs because we have these things that make us comfortable. Cool, if you reframe that thing as the thing that makes me comfortable today is the thing that's gonna make me uncomfortable for a decade, all of a sudden the cost of that comfort goes up. And so then it flips to, if I can become uncomfortable for today, I can be comfortable for decades. And so then you can seek out those 8 hours and say, you know what, I'm gonna flip this thing. Here's the crazy part about work. Work makes you money in 2 ways. One, you work and you make money. And secondly, when you're working, you're not spending money. And so when you're starting out, you literally have a double effect. The money that you're making the whole way through is stacking up because there's no drains on it either. And so one of the biggest advantages you have is that you stay busy. One of the keys to investing is patience. What is patience? Patience is figuring out activities to do in the meantime. Think about it for a second, unpack that. Patience is figuring out what to do in the meantime. So then if the goal is to get rich, and we know that that takes time, and it takes time for money to compound and grow, then what you do in the meantime is that you work so that you have even more money to invest, and that money has the time to invest and compound while you're working. And I am so passionate about this because this isn't something that I didn't do, right? When I had my job in the beginning, I just wasn't really taking the time that I should have. And then I was like, you know what? I don't want to do this thing forever. I got to get ahead, but I couldn't stop doing my job. So I started spending my mornings and my evenings every day and both weekend days working on what I was going to do next. And in the beginning, that was studying for the GMAT because I thought business school was going to be the next move. But after studying for the GMAT and crushing the test, I came to another realization, which was I'm going to go to business school because I want to start a business. Well, you know what? It's going to cost me less than 2 years and $180,000 plus what I didn't make during the 2 years of not working. I could probably net $10,000 a year of income, which is what the average business school person graduated with when I was looking at business school. And I was like, I think I could get to 10 grand a month if I had 2 years to work and didn't spend 180 grand and I took that money and just put it into a business. Now you're like, well, you didn't even have 180 grand. You're damn right I did. I was able to save up 50 and I was like, I think with this 50, I'll be able to spend it to learn enough to make 10 grand a month. And that's what I did.
With so many choices on Booking.com.
Yeah, you just have to look at what assets you have. And the thing is if you're going to go to business school, you're probably going to take out student loans. So a lot of debt.
9, if you don't know how you can lose money in something, then you're going to lose it. Think about this for a second. If something looks amazing and you're like, dude, there's no way I can lose money on this, you're absolutely going to lose your ass because of how little you actually know. And so you have to figure out, one, what is my downside and all the different ways that downside can occur, and then attach a reasonable likelihood that that happens, and then probably multiply it by 3. Because whenever you have your rose-colored glasses on, you're an entrepreneur or you want to be an entrepreneur. One of the quintessential traits of entrepreneurship is optimism. We are optimists. We think it's all going to work out, and you have to have that level of optimism to start. But when you start, you can't continue to have that optimism around every other opportunity, because then you are going to lose your ass because you're going to be split between multiple things. And so if you don't know how you can lose money, you absolutely will, because it just is an index of how little you know. 10, the biggest cost that you have is ignorance. So every single month, you've got your rent, you've got your food, you've got your clothes, you've got your car, you've got whatever else you spend. And you think that's my fixed costs.
So like, that's one of the big things he talks about all the time, is willing to pay for other people's ignorance, because that's the only way you get time back, because you are going to make mistakes no matter what. And that's why he says hire a coach, hire a consultant, hire someone who knows what you don't know. That way you can pay down the ignorance tax. And, you know, the thing is we've hired, I mean, we spent over $200,000 on coaching and coaches and consultants and all that junk. And we're taking a break right now, because at a certain point, there's a lot of information that, like, you just have to apply. And there's a certain level where we're relatively confident we have the information to get over the hump we need to get over. But there is there's the time factor of actually applying it to actually get it done. And that wasn't the point of what I was going to say. What I wanted to say was, there have been coaches that we have hired where we have not had a good experience, and we thought we wasted all of our money. But the funny thing is in certain aspects, and there's certain things that we learned from them, even though they really didn't help us, especially like in the moment, but it's just like what the experience taught us, have proven, even with like the worst coach that I thought we hired, what we were able to apply from that situation and what we learned from it has saved us and made us tons of money down the road.
Years ago, I was sitting in the audience and I saw a man write $1 million on a whiteboard. And he called someone from the audience. He said, how much do you make per year? And they said, $50,000 a year. And he said, would you like to make $1 million a year? And the person said, yes. And then he put a minus sign. And he said, did you know that it's costing you $950,000 per year to not know how to make $1 million a year? And it was such a light bulb moment for me that I realized that the cost of ignorance is the difference between what your goals are and what you have today. Because if you knew how to achieve your goals, the difference is the value of that education. And conversely, the difference is the cost of that debt of ignorance. And so the number one priority in my life has always been to pay down ignorance as fast as I possibly could, using whatever currency I needed to. So if that was relational capital, that means using my network or doing favors for people or paying money, which is the least efficient way of doing it, I would try and find a way that I could pay down ignorance to achieve the things that I wanted. So I could get the information, so I could get the learning. When I started, I paid to get into rooms. I paid $25,000, $35,000. And you're like, wait, I don't have that right now. I get it. Well, you pay $10,000 was the first thing I ever bought that was information-based. That's what was the first thing I ever invested in. And how was I able to do that? Because I had saved for 2 years and I'd saved 50 grand up. And so for me, I was like, okay, this is the direction I'm going in. I'm gonna invest in learning. And when I got in that room, the first room I was in was a gym owner room, and I didn't have a gym. And I paid to be in that room so that I could start the gym the right way. When I paid to the $25,000 room, it was an internet marketing room. And guess what? I didn't have an internet marketing business, but I paid there so I could try and learn how to do it the right way rather than try and start it the wrong way and have to fix it. And so I think a lot of people wait too long to try and learn. I always want to grab my future and pull it towards me. And so I was willing to spend as much money as I had available to me to make those bets because it was a bet on me, and I knew I would never lose that. You can't lose you. You always have diamond hands on you. Like till the day you die, you've got you. And so the thing is about investing in education is that sometimes the lessons you learn aren't the lessons you expect to learn, but you learn them nonetheless. And so sometimes you go into an education thing and you don't get what you thought, but you still get something, and it was still more than what you paid. And so when I went into those rooms, I'd already used up all my money to get in the room. So I was like, okay, what else do I have? And so at the time, I knew how to sell. And so I just went to every single person in the room and was like, can I help you sell stuff? And so they'd be like, well, sure, my sales team sucks, or sure, my script sucks, or sure, my offer sucks, or I don't know how to overcome these objections. And so I would spend an hour, 2 hours.
All right, I got to hop from this live stream today. We'll finish up this video later. But hopefully you guys got some value from this. I've so far really enjoyed the video. There's a lot of good lessons in here. And if you guys got any value at all from this video or from any input I added, please, again, subscribe to the channel. It makes a huge difference for me helping reach entrepreneurs just like yourself who want to grow their businesses and